My guest today in studio is Jason Sweet. Jason, I don't even know where to start. This guy was an NCAA athlete, not in one but two sports, baseball and football. He also was a United States Air Force PJ, a Special Forces operator. He is now the owner of Socom Athlete, where they contract and train and help prep people who want a career in Special Forces to make sure that they have their best chance at succeeding mentally and physically in a career as an operator. Today we're going to talk about the importance of living a humble lifestyle and finding purpose when you hit rock bottom and making the most out of any situation. Brought to you by the Russell Hotel, Nashville's premier boutique hotel, one of the coolest places to stay in Nashville, and Adspire Creative Group, specializing in video marketing that inspires action from your target audience. You're listening to Detours of Life with your host, Craig Ballin. We all start off with goals, but life has other plans. Maybe you wanted to be married with kids by a certain age. Perhaps you thought you'd be living an international life of luxury. Goal setting is important, but the goals are often created from social expectations. We're here to talk about the unexpected, but inevitable detours of life. Whether in relationships, finances, or careers, how we recalculate our route, aka goals, is perhaps our key to mastering life. Setting goals, pivoting when necessary, and forging ahead. We'll talk with Special Force operators, entrepreneurs, expats, highly successful sales agents, to the person next door about their life's detours and how they pivoted successfully. We hope you grab some useful tips and tricks from each and every one of these stories. I'm your host, Craig Ballin, film director, author, Ironman triathlete, speaker, beer enthusiast, dog lover, traveler of 30 plus countries and counting. If you ever see me in the airport, feel free to buy me a beer. And don't forget to hit subscribe. If you get anything out of this, please give us a comment, give us a like. If you have any comments how we can improve, we'd love to hear from you. Make sure you check us out. We do these and put them on YouTube. Also, you can look me up on craigballin.com, TikTok, and Instagram. Let's get started with this episode, Detours of Life. Jason, welcome, brother. Thank you so much for giving us this time.
How are you, brother?
Good, man. I appreciate this. It was so impromptu, but I totally appreciate it. Let's start off. Give me a little bit of background of you growing up, your childhood. What was that like, and what did you envision your life to be as a kid?
Yeah, Craig. So first of all, just it's an honor to be here with you, and thank you for having me on. Can't wait to do this. So when I was a kid, I grew up in the Gulf Coast of Florida. And this is near Eglin Air Force Base, Herbert Field area. Herbert Field is Air Force Special Operations Command headquarters. And my father was actually a PJ, Air Force Pararescueman, stationed down there at Eglin Air Force Base as well. So I was born in that area. And I grew up in the water. Obviously, my dad was a PJ, but he decided to not re-enlist so that he could be a father to me. His dad was never around, and I could tell that my dad took it very personally to be a father that was able to give his son that quality time. So he actually was faced with the decision, and the unit that he was at was getting spun up for that hit in Panama on Noriega, and there was that airfield seizure where they ended up rolling this guy up and taking him back to the States. And I actually have a good friend coming on my podcast next Thursday, JB Spizo, who was on that mission. He's a retired Army Ranger. So Dad was going to go on this mission of a lifetime as a PJ, and he was faced with a decision to either re-enlist and do this mission, or not re-enlist, miss the mission, be a father. So he decided to not re-enlist and be the father that he didn't have. And I'm sure there was other reasons, you can talk to him personally about that, but that was the primary, was to be a father. So he ended up getting out and getting into building houses. And he started off like doing basic construction and remodeling on trailers and worked his way all the way up to where he was doing high-end remodel jobs. And he ended up being fairly successful as a home builder. So we were living in this Niceville, Valparaiso area in the Gulf Coast of Florida, and we ended up moving across the bay to Destin. And this is like the nicer area. It's a big vacation spot. And at the time, man, you could literally see the beach from Destin driving down Highway 98. And now it's just littered with condos and skyscrapers, and you can barely even get down the road during the day. I mean, it's bumper to bumper traffic. It's completely overpopulated. It looks like a different place. But at the time, Destin was like this little hidden gem that nobody knew about. There were lots everywhere, and Dad ended up building hundreds of houses in Destin. Some of them spec homes, some of them custom built homes. But that was pretty much like my youth, man, growing up in Destin, going out on the boat sometimes, swimming around, snorkeling, challenging myself in the water, hanging out with Dad, learning from him on his job sites. You know, I remember just climbing up on those dirt mounds and throwing dirt clods all the time and to practice baseball. And he got me into sports at a young age. I tried karate when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. I mean, I think he got me into, I want to say 4. I think 3 is a little young to get into karate. It's all blur now, but I think I was like 4, almost about to turn 5 years old. And that was the first thing that I can remember in my life having to commit to, and that taught me discipline and having to go home and practice. I remember in karate, you had these things called katas, and a kata was essentially, it was a series of movements, combat related movements in which you kind of systematically put it into almost like a dance. You know, it was like very kata. You know, look that up. I don't even think I can define it, but I remember going home and practicing these over and over and over again. And in order to get your next belt, you had to perform these katas at a certain level. So I think karate really established a baseline for me as a kid. And then after that, Dad got me into like baseball and football, soccer. I mean, he had me try everything. And fast forwarding, going into special operations, I think that was valuable for me to be exposed not only to different challenges physically, but also be exposed to working in a team environment at a young age. So that was my childhood, Craig, in and out of the water, just hanging out with Dad and Mom. Had a little brother 4 years younger than me, and playing sports, man, in the beautiful Gulf Coast of Florida.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm going to prod just a little bit more. So high school is when we find ourselves, when we really start looking who we're hanging out with.
Right.
Give me a little insight on Jason's high school days.
Well, let me rewind a second, because when I was 12, about to turn 13, we decided to move from Florida to Arizona. And that was a big move for us. Culturally, it was a very different area. I liked that whenever I moved to Payson, Arizona, I noticed that people didn't really care about what they were wearing. Like in Florida, everyone was wearing like Abercrombie at the time, like it was exploding, or, Quicksilver or Rusty or, Polo, or everyone was wearing like name brand stuff. They all had their hair done up, their jeans were on a certain way. And I just remember kind of always walking on eggshells when I lived in Florida, because I wanted to be accepted socially. And when I got out to Payson, I noticed that people were just really laid back. It was like country folk, some of the most popular dudes in the school, they wore like yellow basketball shorts and plain black shirts to school. They didn't care, nobody cared about that. So that was a really cool thing for me culturally, moving to this small town in the mountains and leaving the water and kind of adjusting to being an outdoorsy type of guy and riding quads around, obviously continuing to play sports. To answer your question, in high school, one of the most challenging things, if not the most challenging thing in my life, actually happened. My mom got a hysterectomy operation, and this was when I was 16 years old. And for our listeners out there, a hysterectomy is where a woman has her uterus removed so that she no longer has a menstrual cycle. And this operation went very south for her. And it ended up having some side effects. And she developed what's called hypothyroidism, which is an imbalance of your thyroid. So your hormones no longer are balanced. And so you can have depression, anxiety, bipolar symptoms, everything you could ever imagine out of nowhere whenever you have hypothyroidism. So she immediately was given these different medications from doctors, and they didn't work. And she had side effects from those. And she would go from one doctor to the next doctor to the next doctor. And at the time, my father was commuting back to Florida to run this business that I had talked to you about earlier, building homes. Now, when I was 16, it would have been about 2005, 2006. I graduated high school in 2007, okay? The 2008 recession was approaching. So my dad was doing okay at the time, but because my mom needed all of that care and time, Dad couldn't commute back to Florida to run his business. All right. So this is about when the recession started hitting. I graduated high school in 2007, and I ended up getting a full ride baseball scholarship to Grand Canyon University. And as all of this is happening, I graduate high school and I move down to Phoenix. I take a job at the Cracker Barrel as a server, and I get a roommate, and I'm just working that summer and playing in this, like, it's a summer league for local colleges and local universities. It's a scout league. There's pro scouts that go and you get some practice. Usually they get the freshmen in there a lot more in rotations for pitching. Usually have like a pitcher in for every 2 innings or so. So it was a pretty good competitive league, and I was just down there working, and my mom's condition started getting a lot worse. So this is 2007, somewhere around August. And this is about when the recession really starts coming in. And 2008 obviously hits. Well, I spend my freshman year at Grand Canyon University, right? And my arm stops working. And I feel that God gives us, like, as pitchers, a genetic throw count where once you've thrown the ball a certain amount of times, like, you can't throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. It wears out, right? You don't see 85-year-old dudes chucking 100-mile-an-hour fastballs still making $10 million a year in the big leagues, right? There's a point where, as a pitcher, like, you get worn out. And unfortunately, I wore out my arm very early because when I wasn't pitching, I was playing shortstop or center field, or we were playing in double headers, or I was going down to a club baseball tournament to try to get exposure so I could get a scholarship. And I really overused my arm and wore it out. And this didn't really become evident until the actual freshman year. I performed well during the summer season and actually ended up earning a starting spot as a freshman at GCU. I was third in rotation, so we would typically play a 3 or 4 game series against teams. So if Chico State came in town or Hawaii came into town, we'd play 4 games with them, and I would be the pitcher that started on game 3. So it was a pretty prestigious position. But I got out there on my first day and I couldn't throw the ball harder than about 80 miles an hour. And my arm started getting fatigued after like 20 pitches. And I remember just thinking, like, man, like, I can't pitch like this. This is totally different. And it turned out that I had something called dead arm. And it's, again, where your arm is worn out. So my mom is dying. The recession is hitting, and my dad is getting crushed financially because nobody's buying houses. The housing market is tanking. And then all of a sudden, I can't throw a baseball anymore. So things start going really south for me in 2008. And I ended up finishing my freshman season. I was in and out of the disabled list the entire season. They ran x-rays on my arm. They ran imagery, range of motion tests. I tried changing my arm slot. I'm a worker, Craig. So like one of my problems is overworking myself or overuse. So I actually decided not to practice as much, not to do as many drills on my own time before I went to bed. I decided to give my arm more rest. I tried everything.
One of the hardest things for somebody to do, an athlete too, bit. Right? Yeah,
right. So I tried everything, Craig, and it didn't work.
And mentally, what's going through your head and emotionally? Like, I mean, everything's coming down around you right now. You had one shiny object in your life right now. Your mom was doing poorly. Your dad's business was doing poorly. Right. You had this job. Something that was helping them. This scholarship. What was emotionally going through your head at that time? Unfortunately,
I was letting it defeat me, and it was one of the most challenging times in my life. And as a man of God, this would have been the perfect opportunity for me to get on my knees and say, I can't handle this situation. I need you to deliver me out of this situation and give me clarity. But I didn't. I tried to take it all on myself. And I don't know why I did that. But it didn't work out for me.
Was your faith always as strong even back at that age, or was this?
It was. However, as you may know, we go through waves and we go through phases in our lives where sometimes we decide to live in our own selfish ways. And we don't necessarily want to have that relationship with the Lord because it doesn't align with our will at the time. And that's where I was, Craig. I wanted to enjoy college. I wanted to focus on baseball. I wanted to focus on me. and I didn't have a relationship with God at the time. So here I am in this situation where my arm's not working, mom's dying, dad's unsuccessful in his business, and I could tell things are totally falling apart in my life. And I remember being so broke that, and I had this part of my scholarship was this meal card, and the dining facility would close at 8 p.m. So the little homework that I actually did do, sometimes I'd stay up till 11:30, midnight, and I eat every 2 hours. Even as a 31-year-old man now, when I was 19, I ate every 2 hours. And so I remember being so hungry and so desperate that I actually stole chicken from Walmart to eat on multiple occasions. I was at the lowest of the low, hanging out with the crowd. I won't say that they were bad dudes, because they were incredible human beings, and I love them to this day. But they were definitely going down the wrong path.
They weren't making the best choices.
They weren't making the best choices, and neither was I. And together we weren't making good choices. And these were not the type of people that I know were going to help me be a better person and to help me get back on this path that I needed to be on. So everything in my life is literally falling apart at the same time. So I finished up my freshman year at Grand Canyon, and I ended up getting like a 2.6 GPA, like horrible, and majoring in history just to make it easy for me for baseball. At the time, I figured, shoot, I'm going to be a pro baseball player. It's going to happen. So I'll just major in history because I like it, and move back to my hometown and coach baseball, be a hero, and teach history. Easy day. Like, it was such a shallow thing, but I mean, I needed something just to fill that gap, I guess. So I started reevaluating life and like what my path was. So finished up the year. Coach Stapleton was his name. Funny story, actually. My first day of practice, so I was a pitcher, but I also played shortstop. I hit, I stole bases, and I thought that I was going to be able to add value as an athlete to this Grand Canyon University program. So I walk out to practice first day as a freshman. I got my bat on my shoulder, like resting on my shoulder, got my glove, everything. And this coach, he's about 6'3". His name's Stapleton. And Stapleton played in the major leagues. He's been in World Series. He's a big dog. So he comes up with these intimidating eyes, and he just crouches down right in my face. I can smell his breath. And he goes, "What you got there on your shoulders?"
You're a pitcher.
I said, "A bat, coach." He goes, "My name's not Coach. My name's Skip. So I'm going to try that again. What you got on your shoulder there, son?" And I said, "It's a bat, Skip." He goes, "I see that." He goes, "I didn't bring you here to hit the baseball." He goes, "Now you get your ass in that locker room and drop that bat off, and don't ever let me see it again."
Wow.
So that was the type of dude.
Wow.
That was the type of dude I was playing ball for, a no nonsense kind of coach. So the fact that like he had invested a full ride scholarship in me and I wasn't producing, I was very self-conscious about it. So I was surprised that he actually renewed my scholarship. So I had a scholarship still waiting for me my sophomore year. He still was invested in me and believed in me. So I still had hope, but I was in my own rut from just everything coming in together. And I don't know about you, Craig, but it seems like in life, when it rains, it pours. Whenever something seems to go wrong, everything seems to go wrong. Whenever something seems to go right, opportunities, everything seems to go. They all seem to come at the same time, to the point where I kind of wonder if this is like my pattern of behavior that's creating this kind of thing for me, or whether life is just really wild at dealing you those types of cards. But everything was falling down at the same time. So after this freshman year, I decided that I wanted to continue to pursue baseball, but that I was maybe going to look into other things. So I didn't know where to stay, and I didn't want to go back up to Payson, my hometown, which was up in the mountains about 80 miles northeast of Phoenix. I didn't want to go back up there because I had to go up there and be in that gloom and that depressing environment around my mom and my dad. And in reality, like, I should have gone up there and like taken care of them and like stepped it up like as a son. But I was so over it and just trying to like create my own happiness, my own environment, and just block that out as far as possible, that I didn't want any part of it. So my dad had built this house in Paradise Valley, Arizona. And this is like comparative to Scottsdale. It's like Ballerville, Craig. I mean, everyone that lives there is ballin'. So dad builds this house there with some co-investors. And I think it's like a $1.8 million house. Like it's up there. It's big.
Nice.
And this is around when Shaq gets traded to the Suns. Okay. So one day I don't remember what I'm doing, but I get a call from dad, And Dad and I talked, we were very close, but at the time we talked maybe once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks is all. He gives me a call and he's like, hey son, guess what? I'm like, what's up, Dad? He goes, guess who just walked into the house to check it out? Cause it's a spec house. So it's for sale. And they're inviting people like 3 times a week at a certain day to come in and check it out. So he goes, guess who just walked in? I go, who? He goes, Shaquille O'Neal. I'm like, what, man? Shaq just walked in, and I'd never met anyone famous to tell you, so I'm just like, well, what'd you say to him, Dad? He's like, I said, what's up, Shaq? So anyways, Shaq looked at the house just to give you an idea of how immaculate this house is. So long story short, it's under foreclosure and there's no electricity in it. There's no running water, like no nothing. And my dad still has a key. And I say, hey, Dad, like, I need a place to stay, man. I'm going through a tough time. I don't want to go back up to Pace him. And he goes, well, son, he goes, I could give you a key to the house. There's a little love seat in there. You can crash on that, but there's no electricity and no water. And, the bank could come and foreclose on it, or there could be personnel that come out there. So, it might be a little sketchy, but, I'll give you the key if you want to stay there. So I end up staying at this house, and I won't get into all the details of this, but like I said, I was in a tough time in my life. I was stealing chicken from Walmart, for goodness sake, Craig. And I had found a way to come up on some money. And with that money that I came up on, I decided to read a book on how to count cards in blackjack. And I got a fake ID. And I ended up going to casinos on a regular basis as a 19-year-old kid and counting cards and playing blackjack. 19.
So technically that's illegal, right?
It was illegal. Right, okay. It was illegal. So I'm at
fake ID, counting cards.
Bad, okay. Really bad place in life, right? So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But I'm at this casino one night, and I lose all of my money except for maybe like enough to feed myself and like fill my gas tank. I think I left like $28 in my pocket, and I had this feeling in my stomach. It was like deep sickness, almost like the feeling of like when someone you love like leaves you. It was this debilitating feeling. And I go back to this house, and again, no electricity, no running water, no nothing. So I just walk in, it's pitch black. And I just remember thinking, like, where are you at in life, Jay? What are you doing? Where are you going? And it had been a long time since I had talked to the Lord. It had been a long time since I had talked to my father. And I realized that in that moment, like, I was legitimately in the gutter, like the lowest point in my life. Like, so I decided to look up to the sky and say a prayer to the Lord. And I basically called him out. I said, Lord, I know you're listening to me, and I apologize for shutting you out, but I need you now. And I'm open and I'm willing. Whatever you want me to do with my life, I want you to reveal it to me. And not out loud or with writing on the wall. However, he responded to me immediately with this large voice in my head. And he said, how do you want me to tell you? And I noticed that in the Bible, like, there's not a whole lot of times, especially in recent times, you look in the New Testament where the Lord is like, talking to people. Usually he reveals things through us, through other people, through other humans. So I immediately responded with, I'd like for you to have my dad call me the precise moment that I wake up tomorrow morning and reveal to me my new path in life. And I guess I figured that was a good request, because
that's a big ask.
I hadn't talked to my dad in a couple of weeks. It had been a while. The precise moment that I wake up in the morning, I mean, that is way too tough to be a coincidence. And then if he actually starts proactively bringing up what I should do, I know those three things together, that's a miracle. There's no way that could just happen by chance. So I called the Lord out, and he listened. So I go to bed that night, and it must have been like 3 a.m. I completely forgot about that prayer. And I wake up, and I just remember thinking, I cannot believe I lost all my money. And that sick feeling in my stomach happened again. But all of a sudden it clicked, and I remembered that prayer, and I jolted, and I remember looking around for my cell phone, and I had a BlackBerry at the time, right? So I'm looking for the BlackBerry, and I look on the ground, and the one pillow that I have, right? I'm like, it's gotta be under the pillow. So I pull up the pillow, okay? And the phone goes from being illuminated to dark, as if somebody had either just called me or just texted me. So the hair starts standing up on my spine. I'm like, no way. I pick up the phone, and it says, missed call, Dad, 11:31 a.m.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah. So
wow.
I call him back.
Right.
And before I
mean, all of this, you're just like, no, you're probably still going into it like, could it be? Call him back and see what he's going to say now, right?
I was in denial. Yes.
Yeah.
I was in denial. And again, like, who knows? I could still be in a dream, bad dream. So I'm sitting here calling my dad and he answers. And before I can even get into it, he says, son, I got somebody I want you to meet. His name is Chief Master Sergeant James Sanchez, and he's the chief down at the 306 Rescue Squadron, a PJ team in Tucson. And I knew from that moment forward that it was my path to become an Air Force pararescueman.
Wow. Holy cow. So basically with all of that, I mean, so going to or what advice would you give to our viewers then? I mean, you basically asked for the Lord's advice humbly. I think a lot of people will look at their situation. I myself in my past would look at my situation and anger would come over. Like, how can you let this happen to me? How can you do that to my mom or my father? And anger, so it pushes me further away. You somehow, it seemed like you had, I would say, spiritual maturity, that level of knowledge of saying, I need to actually go to my knees and ask for help and guidance. Was that always ingrained in you, or you just hit rock bottom where you said, I need help?
Well, unfortunately, most of us, before we ever ask for help, we have to reach rock bottom before we get there. And that's where typically people come to the Lord. I always tell people it's a real test of your faith and a real test of your friendship with how much you actually talk to somebody or how much you pursue a relationship with somebody when you don't need anything from them. It's really easy to hit somebody up when you need something, right? But when's the last time you hit up one of your friends just to offer help for them? When's the last time you just hit up one of your friends and say, hey man, just want to say hello, and just engage conversation with them, right? That to me is the measure of a true friend. So my biggest advice, Craig, is that in life we tend to blame God for the things that go wrong, but we have something that's called free will. And with that free will, every decision that we make creates exponentially more complex algorithm of other decisions. And we don't necessarily have one path to go down. God gives us boundaries. And so we can make those decisions on a daily basis. And whether or not God allows something to happen to us based on that free will is up to him. But we can't just blame him every time something happens that's not against our agenda. With our agenda. So here I am at this place in my life where I'm at rock bottom, and I had to have the humility to admit it and be open and willing to listen. So I really think that in a time, to give another piece of advice, in a time where there's so much information at your disposals and at your fingertips and so much going on, and you have so many decisions of things that you can actually fill your time with, that can be the worst thing ever, is simply being distracted. And regardless of whether you're a Christian or a Buddhist or Hindu, or you just enjoy meditation, like the important part about meditation is actually removing the distractions and being able to be in a peaceful, calm environment where you can think and you can focus on one thing. But how can you ever focus on one thing if you're constantly distracted and your mind is never fully committed to it? So that's another piece of advice I would give is don't let life beat you down. Don't let yourself take yourself down a road where you're going to come to a dead end and crush yourself just before you're finally willing to listen.
What about your pivot? Like, how were you able, and how hard was it for you to pivot from, but I'm supposed to be a baseball player?
It wasn't a super hard pivot for me because it wasn't like I was dominating on the baseball field and then all of a sudden like I had to make this huge decision. Like It was really, these things were deteriorating. Right. And so I was getting funneled into this path. So that pivot almost happened proactively, but it happened quick. And I remember specifically, based on what we just said, just removing distractions, I remember specifically changing my phone number and moving down to Tucson, shacking up with it was a couple, and they had a room for rent. And I guess the girl, her dad was the commander of this squadron down there. So it's not like it was some randos, but I was paying $300 a month to rent this room. And all I did was go to LA Fitness twice a day, swim, work on underwaters, lunge, Olympic lift. I'd go up in the mountains and run, ruck, and I didn't talk to anybody. And I did this for 3 months until that tryout at the 306 Rescue Squadron. And that was a 1,500 meter swim for time, 3 mile run for time, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and then a 3 mile ruck run. And then they put us in the pool with full camis and try to drown us for about an hour. And after you made it through that, if you made it through that, you do a suit and tie interview. And if they liked you, they said, all right, we'll send you off to boot camp and you'll go through the PJ pipeline.
So at that time, what was that considered? You weren't in the United States Air Force at that time, right?
I was still a civilian. So they have
so
like a pre-assessment. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a tryout. So before you even get to try out for pararescue on the larger scale, you have to try out for that unit. And if you make it through that tryout, you actually get to claim that unit as your permanent duty station. So I knew before going into the Air Force that I was actually going to be stationed down there at Tucson at the 306 Rescue Squadron with Chief Master Sergeant James Sanchez, my boy, my mentor.
Wow. So does that still exist? Basically, is that like a trial where, yes, you pass it, now go into the United States Air Force?
It does. However, it only exists at Guard and Reserve units, and each tryout is different. So the way that it works with the Guard and Reserve unit is the tryout is going to be a bit more prestigious because they're going to be more selective on the personnel that they accept, because they actually have to purchase a slot for you through the pipeline. So you go through the same pipeline as everybody else, but that pipeline is purchased from active duty through the reserve. And then after you get through this 2.5 years of pipeline, you go what's called mission qualifying training so that you can get your 5 skill level. You'll do a deployment, you'll do continued upgrade training, and at that point, you will have been an active duty pararescue trainee and active duty pararescueman for a good 4.5 years. So reserve and Guard pararescue is a sweet gig. I mean, you'll do a long tour of active duty, and then you're faced with that decision. Should I go to school? Should I work another job? Should I just put in my paperwork and do this full time? Maybe go to the 24th STS and assess to that unit, or go do something else. So it was a really sweet gig. The Lord was definitely looking out for me.
So that because that's new for me to hear. So that's something somebody in high school looking and considering. What would you recommend, that path, or would you recommend saying, were there Socom Athlete, like the business you run, that helps these candidates? Is that pre going to them and trying to get qualified?
Right. So what I do now is I prep candidates before they actually go and try out. So that's essentially what it would be. It was preparation before you go to the military so that they can make sure that you're ready.
Nice. Make sure you pass that test.
Exactly.
Very cool. So what is the piece of advice you would be giving to, I guess, some of your students? And give me some, I'm sure you have their walks of life all from different ends. You know, I know last time there was like 38-year-old who was going through your class. There was, I think, a 20-year-old. There was a female who was, what advice would you give them relating with some of these kids, these students, these 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 24-year-olds, maybe right out of college or something, that are in a point in their life, it's they're needing a detour, or they're not sure, they're resisting a detour. What would you say, like, before they hit rock bottom? What should they start considering to do?
Yeah, first thing that you need to do is prayer or meditation, whatever you're into. Block everything out, get to a place where you can focus, where there's not distractions, and just focus on your future. Focus on what those thoughts are. Block everything else out. Second is that you ask advice from mentors, people you trust, right? And then third, sleep on it. Be patient. Give it some time. And you have to realize that whenever we're looking for answers, we're not always going to get the answers right when we want. We got to wait on the Lord's timing. We got to trust that timing. So don't think that just because you got on your knees and you prayed just like I did, that you're going to get that answer right away. That's not how it works. I was very blessed and very lucky for that situation. Also, you want to make sure that you're not pursuing a false identity, there's a lot of candidates and a lot of young friends of mine, even myself, all of us are guilty of this at times, where we're pursuing this identity. We want this mark on our sleeve. We want this mark on our chest. We want to be able to put this on our social media profile. We want to be able to tell such and such that this is what we do, or this is what we're pursuing. And this is our day to day. So if you're just looking to do something great and to pursue excellence so that you can put it on your Instagram profile, or you can tell your girlfriend or your boyfriend's parents, hey, this is what I do, or this is what I'm going for, that's not good enough. A good friend of mine, JB Spizzo, going to have him on the podcast next week, actually. He says there's no shortcuts to excellence. So accept it. You are going to have to sacrifice and put in a lot of time to be able to achieve anything that's excellent. There's a saying, and it's also based on a Bible verse out of Matthew. Those that live by the sword must be willing to die by the sword. Live by the sword, die by the sword. So many people are obsessed with the identity and the end game and what it's going to look like, but they don't even consider the pain and the suffering that it's going to take to get there. Like whether it's being a doctor or a Navy SEAL, both of those sound really good, right? And there's movies about all of them, and you think, oh man, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a Navy SEAL. But what you didn't think was the sleepless nights and all the coffee and staying up all night and having so much pressure and so many deadlines, and then doing it again and again, or being in water that's so cold for 40 minutes that you're questioning your existence. Right? Is it worth it for you? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Are you prepared to die by the sword and not just live by the sword? That's my advice in a nutshell to our young listeners.
I love that about the deep look at, because again, we glorify so many things, and we see on social media just the highlights, the good times. We see people graduate. We see like the cool stuff. I mean, that's what social media is just, taking the best moments of life. We don't see all the awful things, we somehow edit those out. But I've never heard it put that way, is be careful not to pursue a false identity, which I think in our society is super hard for, I'd say anybody, but especially those coming through in their 20s. Pursuing a false identity is extremely hard.
I think one of the reasons why it's hard, Craig, is because we're living in a time where we are being told that the playing fields are even. We're all the same. We're all capable of the same things. But in reality, we're very different, and we all have our unique gifts. We're all different heights. We all look different, and we have to accept what our genetic abilities are, and we have to accept the cup that's been put in front of us. Now, you don't have to accept mediocrity, and you don't have to accept being below average by any means, but accepting who you are and the gifts that you have is what I'm focusing on. Because if you can use those gifts and you enjoy them, that's where you will add benefit and value to whatever team that you're going to be on. And if you're not adding benefit and value to the team that you're on, you're probably not going to enjoy your craft.
I love that. That's so perfectly said. We are not all equal. We're all given different gifts. Sometimes we try to force ourselves into a different direction. Sometimes we're putting that round peg in a square hole. It's just not working. And I think giving an honest look of saying, what am I here to do? How can I serve versus how can I self-fulfill my wants, glorify myself and pursue it for myself? I think that's a good hard look a lot of people forget to do is, what do I have to work with? What did God bless me with to work with first off? If y'all haven't looked up, Jason Sweet, look him up on social media. Look him up. God kind of gave him like blessings in all aspects of like genetics, solid, good looking guy, amazing chin, great hair. Everything.
Thanks for throwing in the chin comment there, Craig. you the man.
So, but it's so true. Not all of us have the ability to do everything we think we want to do, but it's one of those things about pivoting in life. Your arm just stopped working. You got a dead arm syndrome, and you had to say, well, I can just continue doing these bad choices and
just quit, roll over, die,
make bad choices, just whatever, you start partaking in drugs and all this other, just going in that bad direction, or just say, okay, there's something better that wasn't it. Let me find the route I can still be something good. I can contribute to society, be a good human being, help others. Let me pivot from there. And I just see so many youth, so many human beings waste so much time and energy. And as you know, life goes by fast. The older you get, life just speeds up. So for those 20-year-olds that are listening, you might think, wow, high school took forever, but it really is a snap. Your 20s go by just as fast. It's a sad thing to waste so much time, and I think so many of us are guilty to mope, to feel sorry for ourselves. And it's an amazing thing that you were able to be humble and ask for a different direction, look for a different direction. And a lot of times I think God, life, whoever it is that you speak to, whatever you believe into, if your eyes are open and you ask for it, answers will come. We just have to first be open and be asking for help. So that was just a perfect story that you shared with us.
Thank you, Craig.
So going further with that, I think, what would you say to, I guess, those that wanted to pursue a career? We'll get to those that are making it through the pipeline and your journey through the pipeline. But those first that it's just, it's not in your deck of cards and you've seen it, maybe you see it through some of your students. What do you say? How do you speak to them in advice?
Right. There's been plenty of things in my life that I've pursued and it was not in my deck of cards and it broke my heart. But it's all about getting on to the next thing and not trying to chase that rabbit hole, right? So I'll go back to what I was talking about earlier and drinking the cup that's been placed in front of you, seeking your purpose. And that's really what it comes down to, seeking your purpose.
I love that. Yeah. Let's jump into, you just got into this amazing school, or what would you call it? You just got into United States Air Force and you just got inducted, or how would you say it? You just
well, I
qualified.
So I had made it through the tryout and they picked me up. So they sent me off to boot camp to go through the PJ pipeline.
With that, what were you thinking? You're like, oh shit, this is happening, this is real, or were you just so excited?
It happened quick, and it's funny you ask because you and I are here in the studio in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm staying with my good friend Nick, and I'll never forget, Nick is actually the first guy I ever met after I enlisted in the Air Force. We get off this bus and you see the MTIs, military training instructors, and they got those funky looking, big, flat, mountainy looking hats, right? Did you say mountainy? So they got the mounty hats, right? And these dudes are just laying into you as soon as you get off the bus. I mean, they got their...
Just like in the movies.
Oh, dude, they got their hat pressed on your forehead, spitting in your face. They're yelling so loud. I mean, they are on you.
Now, does it get real fast, or
it gets very real fast whenever you feel this little tingling sensation start from your lower back and work its way up to the top of your spine, and you don't really want to move? That's when you know it's real. So I remember that feeling, and we're standing there at attention, and they're yelling at us. They're like, "Why aren't you standing in the position of attention?" We don't know what the position of attention is. So that's immersion training, right? So I'm learning the position of attention. And I remember standing there, and the TIs went down. They were probably 50 yards away, way far away from us. And I hear this voice, "Just like the movies, man." And I look over at this dude, and he's got this big old smile, and he's got this fist clenched out at me, and I give him a little fist bump. He goes, "Hey, man, what career field you going for?" I said, "I'm going for pararescue." He goes, "Me too, man." And I remember from that moment on, Nick and I became great friends, and I'm staying with him this weekend, as a matter of fact. So that was boot camp, and that was how we started boot camp. And we actually had this flight called Flight 065, and it was the first flight that the Air Force had ever had where it was all special warfare wannabes, or battlefield airmen wannabes that they called them at the time. So you had SEER, PJ, CCT, TAC-P, SAL-T, all in the same flight. And so the Air Force had actually got this drill instructor to cross over from the Marine Corps into the Air Force specifically to train our flight. And he was this 6'4", terrifying, light-skinned dude named Staff Sergeant Carl Little. And he was everything but little. This man was intimidating. He had a deep, thunderous voice. You could tell he played like college basketball, and he was mean as a snake. But he was also hilarious. So he was witty. He would haze you, and it would be so funny that like you would almost be like laughing at the other trainee, you know, under your breath. But then you knew like he was coming right for you, so you didn't want to laugh. So I mean, this dude just tore us up, man. But I mean, he really kind of got us indoctrinated into being mean and having a purpose and being a warrior and being tough. And he hardened us up. And I really, to this day, I keep in touch with Staff Sergeant Little. And that's where I met some of my best friends, is in that boot camp. And graduated boot camp, and we moved over to the Medina Training Annex. And this is over for the Pararescue Indoctrination course, 10.5 weeks of fun and adventure. And this course had a 90+% attrition rate, which means that 9 out of 10 of the dudes that start do not finish. We started with 100 guys, and 2.5 months later, we graduated 15. So we had a larger class, actually. But what was funny about the Pararescue Indoctrination course for me is that my dad obviously was a PJ, and so he calls down to the schoolhouse on like day one, and he gets a hold of our mutual friend, Craig, Mike Maroney. And Mike loves to drown people in the water, right? So he goes, Mike, he goes, hey, man, he goes, I just want you to make sure my boy earns his way through like we did back in our day. Kept it pretty simple. And Mike goes, don't worry, sir, I'll take care of it. And he did. And I tell you what, man, like as a college athlete going into Indoc, you know, people have like said, hey, man, you know, did you crush Indoc? Absolutely not. I don't know too many people. There have been guys out there that crushed Indoc, but absolutely not. I made it through my first team. I didn't get set back, but I did not crush Indoc. I'd say the water confidence portion I crushed. Swimming I crushed. The runs I crushed. But there were some things that I did not crush. And one of those, there was a day where we did this exercise called Ditch and Dawn. And Ditch and Dawn is where you tread water in the pool, Skylark pool, so it's 10 foot, all right? And you have a 16-pound weight belt on. You've got your rocket fins, you got your booties, and you got your mask. Jeez. And you tread water for 1 minute and 30 seconds. And treading water in fins with a weight belt on for 1 minute 30 seconds, it's fairly trivial for an athlete that's made it that far. Strong
it is hard to tread water without weight, period.
It's pretty challenging. It gets your heart rate up, right? So get your heart rate up, and then they say, utilizing a murky water descent, ditch your gear. And you dive down to the bottom of the pool, you take your fins off, and there's a checklist for how it has to be done. The instructors will come and grade it afterwards, so if you don't get it right, you fail. You got to put the fins perfectly on top of each other to where one's not in front of the other, one's not to the left, one's not to the right. And then you lay your mask lens down, so glass down on top of the fins, and it can't be too far forward or too far back. And then lastly, you take your weight belt and you place it on top of the mask and the fins, secure it all together so it anchors down at the bottom of the pool. And then you look it over real quick, get back up to the surface before you pass out, start treading water again for another 1 minute, 30 seconds. The instructors will come down and grade your gear, let you know if you pass. If you pass, you go down and you don your gear, you come back up, wait for the instructors to clear you, and you finish the evolution. If you fail, you have to go through another round. And the problem with that is the second round is never easier than the first because your heart rate just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. So I'll never forget this day, man. Mike comes up right after I got done, and I always took care of business on Ditch and Dawn. But this one time, Mike comes up and he goes, "Thweet, failure." Math in front of Foot Cup. And I was like, I wanted to be like, negative,
That
sir.
is an awesome impersonation. If y'all need to meet Mike, that's perfect.
And I remember like, in the military, you learn discipline. You got to have a filter. So like the first thing I want to say was negative, sir. But I remember just like holding back and just like giving him this look. And he's like, "Thweet, why are you looking at me like that?" And so
he told me to go do it again. And I remember having to go down there and do this entire evolution again. And I'm like, okay, dude, like I got this. And I barely was able to get my fins and my mask on and get it all in line before feeling like I was going to pass out. And I start getting back up to the surface again. And right before I get up to the surface, I decided to look down and I see Mike swimming over to my gear again. And I notice right before I get above the water that he's like messing with it.
Oh no.
So I get back up and Mike goes, "Sweet, failure, mask in front of foot cup." And I'm just like thinking, no way, dude. I just got this right. This dude's trying to kill me. And this time I said it. I was like, "Negative, sir." And he looks at me, he goes, "What? Negative what?" And he goes, "Sweet, your father's been training for you this your entire life." And I was like, "Negative, sir." And he's like, "Are you telling me your father didn't train you for ditch and don?" I'm like, "No, sir." He's like, "Oh, you're going to throw your dad under a bus like that? Sweet." And he started getting under my skin. And I'm like sitting here in the middle of Skylark Pool, just Mike and I. Everyone else is cleared out of the pool. And he is just crushing me. So I got to go down and do it again. And this time, I just about pass out on my way up, but somehow made it. I didn't get my gear squared away that time, but he let me get out of the pool and pass me on. So I remember that specifically being a challenging day. I sucked at pull-ups. I was a pitcher in college, so I never worked upper body. And I remember only doing 9 pull-ups the first day I showed up, and you had to do 13 perfect pull-ups to graduate. So that was an asterisk for me the entire time, like trying to figure out how to get better at pull-ups at Indoc on this type of agenda.
Well, and when you say perfect pull-ups, like, describe the perfect. It is not a normal pull-up.
Right.
Most people would be like, "Oh, I can do 15, 20.
Right. So when I say a perfect pull-up, I'm saying you extend your arms fully to where you are doing a dead hang from the bar, and then you pull yourself all the way up to the bar to where your collarbone touches the bar, and then you go all the way back down to full extension, and then pull yourself all the way up. No kipping, no movement of the arms and the legs. They're very serious about the form. So you got to do 13 perfect pull-ups. So barely graduated with the pull-ups. I did 14 to graduate. I'll never forget this one pull session we had. We were doing this exercise called 10-ups, and this was extended training day. They had made us stay up about 2 nights. We got about 2 nights, 2 hours of rest the first night, about 3 hours of rest the second night. And this was our 4th pull session in 48 hours. And they would make us do this series of push-ups where we were holding the up position, holding the down position, maybe knocking them out real quick. And we were spread out as a team, divided into 2. One team on one side widthwise of the pool, the other team on the other side widthwise. You're in the push-up position. Instructors say, "Go!" And you jump into the pool, and you got to swim all the way to the other side underwater. But the problem is the team is literally swimming at each other, and dudes are in self-preservation mode. Self-preservation mode, it means you no longer are thinking about anything else except for surviving, and you will literally bury or drown anything to do that. So guys are like kicking you in the head because they're literally trying not to drown, and then you've got an entire other side. If they're smart, they'll say they're going high beforehand. You'll say you're going low, so you'll have some type of methodology to it. Then you get to the other side, drag yourself out of the pool, and you're back into the push-up position. We've been doing this for about 2 hours. And I remember looking over to my left, and there's this guy named Sam Turner. He was the toughest dude in our class, and Sam starts sobbing. He goes, and these little tears start coming out of his eyes. And I remember just looking over at Sam, and I wasn't particularly sad at the time, but I start crying and sobbing too. And I look over to my right, and I don't remember who it was, but old boy to my right is crying and sobbing. So we're literally broke, the entire team. We're crying, we're sobbing, we're completely beyond physical and mental exhaustion. I don't know if you guys, our listeners out there, know what it's like to be beaten down past mental exhaustion, but it is something serious. And then all of a sudden, you're going again. No time to feel sorry for yourself. You just got to get through it. And I remember pressing through that and just kind of thinking, you know what, this isn't that hard at this point. Like, there's no way they're going to get rid of me. I'm just going to continue to go through the motions here. Like, they're going to have to kill me. Like, this is it. This is what I'm meant to do. There is no quit. There's only success. And to go back on advice to our listeners out there, don't focus on the word never quit. Don't focus on don't quit. What you should be focusing on is what you want to accomplish, right? That's called positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is saying, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. Positive reinforcement is saying, succeed, you got this. Succeed, you got this. And there is a difference on how your mind responds to it. So that was Pararescue Indoc, 10 and a half weeks of fun. Graduated that course with 15 of my brothers, and then we headed on down to Combat Dive School in Panama City. And that was that.
That's awesome, man. So I like how you said that one thing right there is, you know, and I think, again, in life, I just taking putting that into life context or something that everybody can use and take away is we start feeling sorry for ourselves. We have that moment to feel sorry for ourselves. We will nurture it. We'll like let it just like a cancer breed and just like evolve into something, this big old mess. But a lot of times, especially in your position, y'all didn't have time. Y'all were sitting there for a few seconds starting to cry. What did it do? It spread to the next person, then the next person. You know, if given more time, y'all probably would just turn into a floppy mess. But there was no time. Just like in life, it's just like, ready, go, next step. All right, don't focus on it, just move on. And I think that's a really cool thing. I think that a lot of people get away from, they have a bad day, they pull the curtains around, maybe pop open a beer, and they just hibernate and resonate. They soak in that whatever. Now, I'm all for sometimes you do need a moment, whatever, something bad happens in your life, you know, feel it, you know, sob, whatever you need to do, but move on. Like you said, like you got to go. And that's a really cool thing just to hear in that context is everybody started sobbing and then it spread to another person started sobbing, but y'all didn't have time to just sit there. Granted, some of y'all, one of y'all could have, you know, tapped out, you know, but the really cool thing that I love hearing about that is, don't let it set in. Just go. You don't have time.
Just move forward. Rebound.
Yeah. I love that. But what else can we talk about, Jason? What made you the person you are up until that point?
Right.
What got you there?
Well, as I said earlier, this was a path that God led me into. So there was something that he wanted to use me for on this path. But first I needed to not just get indoctrinated from a pararescue standpoint, but I needed to get indoctrinated into how to be a great person and how to be a good selfless teammate and how to be a humble person. Because when I first joined the military, I didn't know what humility was. And I was also self-conscious. So I always wanted to feel respected. I always wanted to get recognition because I felt underappreciated and underrespected. And so it was not only a sense of kind of false pride, but it was also a self-consciousness about me. So the first time that I noticed the Lord was trying to teach me a lesson with this was in the pararescue indoctrination course at the time after you had graduated, after you had made it through extended training day, you got to wear these blue collars called a blue ascot. So we were authorized to wear these collars essentially called blue ascots, and you would put them under your shirt top, right? So your camo top, and it put your camo top on top, and it would be like almost like a turtleneck looking thing. It was blue. I mean, so you stood out like a sore thumb. And I remember we had earned these things, and I felt so like this sense of pride when I got them. And then we went to this chow hall, as we called it, dining facility, and there were a bunch of security forces trainees there. I mean, hundreds of them all waiting in line. And then there's like 15 of us that come in with these blue collars on. And I remember everyone just stopping and turning around and looking at us, you know. And, you know, you got all these like square jawed, like weathered looking young dudes that are all wearing these blue things, and everyone's just staring at us. And I remember for the first time feeling like this sense of pride and like self-acceptance, and it felt good. But at the same time, the Lord also put on my heart, hey, you're not better than anyone in here. Don't think that you're above anyone in here, and don't ever feel that way. And that was something that he revealed to me very early, and that was something that I tried to work on from that moment forward, was that even though, and I wasn't elite at the time, I was just a wannabe, just a trainee. However, even if you are elite, even if you're the best, you always remember where you came from. You always keep it humble, and you always remember that you're blessed, and that's it. That's it. So keep it humble. People will respect you for it. Never think that you're above the system. Never think that you're above anyone. And from a military aspect, always remember that we're all just a link in the chain, and everyone's job has value. I won't say that everyone's job has equal value, because we know that's not true, but every job has value. So that was something that I was learning very early in my career, was humility. And I know for a fact, most of our guys that come to Socom Athlete, that come to my program in particular, they come to it because they find out about special operations via the Navy SEAL career, whether it be a movie that they see or a book that they've read. Well,
There's a book on Navy SEAL?
I think one. So typically they're searching that identity that we talked about earlier, and this identity to be a badass or to be elite, you know, to walk into a bar and everyone respects you, or to, like we're saying earlier, tell your girlfriend or your boyfriend's parents, like, I'm a Navy SEAL, or I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. That sounds pretty cool. But when it comes down to saying I'm a PJ or I'm going to go be a PJ, nobody knows what that is. And so I naturally had to learn how to be humble, because if I went out and proactively told somebody, hey, I'm in the Air Force training to become a PJ, they say, okay, what is that? And I start trying to explain it to them. It ends up making me sound arrogant. I sound like I'm lying in the first place. So I learned to just keep it to myself and not have to go out there and try to tell everyone what I did, and go out there and try to get that acceptance. And this was a process, but I know now that this is the largest reason why God led me into pararescue, from a personal growth aspect at least, was to teach me humility.
That's awesome, man. I think that's like a perfect soundbite right there. Just one of the biggest things in life is humility, and pursuing things with humility, making sure you're pursuing things, like we said earlier, not with a false reason, a false identity, just trying to fill something. And I think that's where a lot of people get lost or trip up these days, is we want to feel something that we're looking on social media and going, well, I envy that. We need to think about, why do we want to pursue that direction, that route? And I think a lot of times we get hung up when it was for the wrong reasons in the first place. We don't let go. We don't pivot well. And I know, like you said, we're not all blessed with the same genes. We're not all jobs are equal, but whatever it may be, I would say everybody's objective or everybody's job to another person is definitely going to be, I guess, subjective to what is the importance of it.
Amen.
If that makes sense.
Amen. I agree 100%.
So again, during this right now, we're in this pandemic, COVID-19, where I think we've seen a lot of people come forward. And, you know, right before that, Nashville got hit by a tornado, pretty bad tornado. And some of the biggest heroes, unsung heroes, were garbage men working overtime, just picking up this debris, you know. And again, probably one of the biggest unsung heroes that have something that people probably look down on or people don't respect, but literally our society needs it. You know, and that's one thing I think, like when you said, nobody's better than anybody. And I think be humble, because we don't know truly what job is, you know, going to serve us or help us, what's in the background, what's helping us. All the waiters and servers, you know, janitors, keeping the society running. But absolutely, like when it comes to y'all, I would be in your shoes wearing that blue collar. I would be like, well, you know, I'm protecting your freedom and I'm a badass protecting your freedom. So immediately my head would probably start trying to swell up. But I love the fact that you kind of said, I try to explain it to people and it's not worth it, or it sounds like, you know, they just think I'm lying. So you had to learn to be even more humble.
And it was a process. You could tell that I had gone out and tried before to explain it to people and be Mr. Cool Guy. But
right.
Again, it was a process of humility and learning this over time.
But what kind of, how did that change you right there? Because you started trying to say, well, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. This is what the pipeline I'm going through.
Right. I wanted that identity, man. Again, I was at the all-time low in my life. So it was exciting to me to be a part of this, but I needed to learn how to be excited about it in a humble tone, which is complicating, right? As an athlete too, you know, you're taught to go out there and give your story. You're taught to go out and put your name out there so that you can get scouted more. You can put your story out there more, but it's quite the opposite in special operations.
Absolutely. And it's funny because Mike and one of the most humble dudes ever too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you look at him,
Oh, yeah.
what is he, like
5'6"?
5'6", this tiny guy who's just has served so many tours and been there. One of my dear friends, Mike Flores, just every single person, every PJ that I've had the pleasure of calling a friend, I would say are probably some of the most humble human beings. And it's a really interesting thing to think of when you think of a pararescue men, special forces. And is it something bred during the pipeline, or is it just something that part of that's the characteristic that drives y'all to the PJ route?
That's a characteristic that you got to have, that they are searching for in the pipeline. And if you don't have it, you will get weeded out.
So why do you think they're looking for that?
Because that's the kind of person that you can trust on the battlefield to get your teammates home alive and get the mission done at all costs, any place, anytime.
Because it's not about individuality. It's not about me.
It's not about you. It's the mission.
That's
it's about
awesome.
the mission.
That is awesome. Man, Jason, I think that's a perfect place to end it. Life is about the mission of how we can serve our fellow human beings in general. Appreciate it again, brother. I'll send you off right now to help those potential candidates in the Special Forces. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back in here.
Hey, Craig, thank you so much for having me on, brother. It's always a pleasure to be around you, man. God bless you, and I'll talk to you soon. Looking forward to the next episode, man.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. And remember, detours of life are unexpected, but inevitable. The key of mastering life, setting goals, pivoting when necessary, and forging ahead.